While many of the headlines this week have been dominated by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing his future resignation, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has made some headlines for her response, which was a scathing rebuke with very strong words. Smith also had a back and forth with President-elect Donald Trump during his ongoing tariff threats and now annexation threats. Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi will finally run for a seat in the legislature after taking over the party last year. Alberta also plans to double its oil production and increase exports to the United States despite the oil and gas cap, which Alberta also issued a fresh response to. All of this and more on this week's episode of the Alberta Roundup. I'm your host, Isaac Lamoureux, and it's a great honor to be back on the show after the holiday break. Let me know if you experienced any Christmas blues. I know I was in a lull for weeks, but let's hop into that first story between Trudeau and Smith now. In a post to X, Smith criticized the Liberals for the Prime Minister's decision to prorogue Parliament, delaying critical discussions and leaving Canada without clear leadership during a very challenging period. Smith said, quote, "The Liberal Party has no such mandate from Canadians, and they are putting their selfish political interests ahead of the Canadian people by paralyzing Parliament and suspending democracy for months while they fight a divisive internal leadership contest. It is one of the most irresponsible and selfish acts of a government in Canadian history." Smith urged every federal party and MP to force an election as soon as possible. Alberta's premier did an interview with Fox News where she said the following.
But with the wokeism, with the extreme environmentalism, with the punitive approach to taking to anything from mining to all the way through to the development of oil and gas, excessive carbon taxes, making life more unaffordable, spending like mad, seeing the increase in inflation. I think we've had parallel experiences over the last 4 years, and quite clearly Canadians had enough of it. I personally think that we'd be better off going straight into an election. I would like to see a new prime minister chosen so that we would have a 4-year mandate. Your incoming president, Donald Trump, has a 4-year mandate. We need to be able to have somebody who has the credibility of a 4-year mandate behind them as we get into these really difficult conversations about tariffs.
Smith also discussed the likely future Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre's interview with Jordan Peterson, which has now garnered more views than Canada's population, sitting at over 42.5 million on X alone. Smith asked the Fox News host and all Americans to be patient and just wait a few months because by that time, she said that a dramatic turn will occur in this country and a strong partner for the United States may emerge. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who chairs the Council of the Federation, informally known as Canada's Premiers, has asked Trudeau to put 100% of his energy into addressing the pending tariff threats, which may prove challenging given the leadership race currently taking place. Smith said she agrees with Ford and that the federal government's singular obsession needs to be on the tariff threat. She added that while the premiers are doing what they can, she doesn't feel that Trudeau will be able to stop the tariffs, which is why she's calling for a federal election immediately. Smith informed people on X that she would be in Washington during President-elect Donald Trump's upcoming inauguration. While this has been known for some time, I previously reported in an exclusive that Smith would be attending the inauguration on Capitol Hill, despite earlier reporting suggesting otherwise. Trump will be sworn in on January 20th. Alberta's representative office in Washington, D.C. was given tickets to Trump's inauguration so Smith could attend in person. Smith also issued a recent statement on Tuesday, reminding people that Canada is the 9th largest economy in the world that buys more products and services from the U.S. than any other single nation, and more than Germany, UK, France, Italy, and Vietnam combined. She said, quote, "We can strengthen our partnership even further in the coming years by securing our shared border and fighting unfair Chinese trade practices that harm workers in both of our countries." The stance against China is a thought echoed from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who has recently been outspoken on China. His recent Fortress Am-Can plan paid special attention to helping the American economy decouple from China. Ford also recently implemented a border security framework paralleling Alberta's recently implemented policies. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about the premiers having to step up and negotiate with Trump over the economic livelihood of Canada in Trudeau's absence, and as a result of him forcibly shutting down Parliament to avoid a non-confidence vote. So for our next story here, after being bashed by the premier and numerous ministers for refusing to run to become an MLA, Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi has finally announced that he will run for a seat. It seems that Rachel Notley's retirement provided the opportunity, given he will run for her vacant seat. Nchi said, quote, "This doesn't mean I'm leaving Calgary behind. While still proudly Calgarian, I'm already dividing my time between the two cities, and I'm looking forward to learning more about Edmonton." The Edmonton-Strathcona seat was the second safest seat in the whole province in the 2023 provincial election, despite the NDP losing to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's United Conservative Party. Notley won the seat with 79.7% of the vote share in the seat, a 62.4% higher margin of the total vote than the UCP candidate. And despite the Alberta NDP's defeat by former Premier Jason Kenney in 2019, the Edmonton-Strathcona seat was again the safest for the NDP, seeing a 72.3% vote share and a 55.2% margin. Notley held the seat between 2008 and 2024. The last time a Conservative represented the riding was Julian Kozak in 1986 with the now-defunct PC Alberta Party. The 2023 provincial election saw the Alberta NDP win only 2 seats outside Edmonton and Calgary. That was in Banff, Kananaskis, and Lethbridge West. The Alberta NDP will nominate a candidate for the upcoming by-election in Edmonton-Strathcona on January 22nd. Nchi is currently the only candidate eligible for nomination. If no other approved candidates seek the nomination 3 weeks before the meeting, he will automatically be granted the candidacy. Nchi became leader of the Alberta NDP following a leadership contest in June 2024, where he won on the first ballot with 86% of the vote. In December 2023, the Alberta NDP had 16,224 members. During the leadership race that Naheed Nenshi won, the number allegedly surged to 85,144. However, Elections Alberta later cited the Alberta NDP for inflating its membership numbers. Before Nenshi's announcement, an Alberta minister called him out for celebrating his, quote, first legislative session. Alberta Minister of Transportation Devin Dreeshen said, quote, "Nchi never served one day in the legislature because he refuses to run in an election to become an MLA." Smith also previously criticized Nenshi for not running in the Lethbridge West by-election, which the NDP won. She has until June 30th to call a by-election in Edmonton-Strathcona. Naheed Nenshi was formally elected as Calgary mayor in 2010 with 40% of the vote and re-elected in 2013 with 74% of the vote. In 2017, he won a third term with 51% of the vote. However, he did not seek re-election in the 2021 election when Jyoti Gondek took power. The current UCP government of Alberta is pushing back further against the war on fossil fuels by aiming to double its oil production and increase exports to the US. A press release on Monday highlighted that Alberta is working to expand its pipeline capacity and double crude oil production. The province has signed a letter of intent with Enbridge, the energy behemoth headquartered in Calgary, which transports nearly 20% of the natural gas consumed in the United States and accounts for 30% of North America's crude oil production. Enbridge transported nearly 4.4 billion barrels of oils and liquid in 2023. Over the last decade, Enbridge has transported almost 37 billion barrels of oil. The organization delivers around 5.8 million barrels of crude oil and liquids daily in its cross-continent pipeline network. Enbridge and the Alberta Petroleum Marketing Commission will form a working group to evaluate future egress, transport, storage, terminaling, and market opportunities across the 29,000 kilometers that Enbridge operates. Smith said, quote, "The world needs more Alberta oil and gas, and we need to make sure Alberta is meeting those needs. This will also allow us to play a role in supporting the United States in its energy security and affordability goals." So Smith is making good on a promise she made while speaking at a Tucker Carlson event a year ago when she vowed to double the province's oil and gas production. Smith has gone toe-to-toe with the federal government on many occasions regarding how much oil should be produced in the province and the country. She previously called Trudeau's oil and gas cap a, quote, deranged vendetta targeting Alberta. She had also launched a nationwide advertising campaign warning Canadians about the consequences of a federal cap on the oil and gas sector. Alberta previously became the first non-US state to join a United States energy pact. The province accounts for 56% of oil imports into the United States, double the amount Mexico, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq collectively provide. Despite the possible tariffs, major Canadian oil producers have predicted production growth for 2025. Similarly, the Canadian Association of Energy Contractors has predicted the highest oil and gas drilling in 2025 since 2015. Alberta's Energy Minister Brian Jean previously discussed how Alberta plans to partner with Trump's more pro-energy government in 2025 and going forward on the Alberta Roundup. He said this.
And if we're going to, get this product to market that is the best product in the world, that is the most environmentally friendly and best for human rights and jobs, then we need to get more of it out of the ground and into pipes that go south and go east and go west and north.
Alberta's Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz issued a release on Wednesday saying that this was the federal government's last chance to scrap the cap. She said, quote, "For too long, we have watched this federal government ignore the needs of Canadians while attacking our economy and our energy sector. The proposed emissions cap is not just bad policy, it's an economic wrecking ball aimed at the heart of Canada's economy." Schultz explained that a 35% cut to emissions by 2030 is not realistic or achievable, and that global emissions would increase nonetheless. She said people across the country will lose their jobs, businesses will close, costs will rise, and government revenues and services will be cut. She said, quote, "The federal government needs to listen to Canadian provinces, industry, workers, small businesses, and families from coast to coast instead of creating a constitutional and economic crisis. This production cap violates Canada's constitution, and we are already preparing to take this fight to the courts if these regulations ever become law." The oil and gas cap is not to be confused with the electricity cap, which Ottawa recently shifted to a net zero power grid by 2050. The original plans were to reach net zero by 2035. Alberta said it doesn't matter because the year doesn't affect the constitutionality, and any such advances will be challenged in court. The Alberta government previously used the Sovereignty Act to shield the province from the mandated net zero grid by 2035. But instead of getting into the nitty-gritty of the many times Alberta has and will take the feds to court, let's hop into a quick short story. So this quick sports shout out will be for my Calgary Flames fans. Yeah, I don't know if you heard, but the Flames versus Kings game in Los Angeles on Wednesday got postponed due to the ongoing fires, and a date for a makeup game has yet to be scheduled. Los Angeles seems to be dealing with a similar situation that we saw in Jasper, but without diving too deep into that and landing myself in some trouble, let's hop in to the comment roundup. The first comment comes from @BasketHound2133, who said, quote, "The majority of Canadians and Americans want cheap, affordable gas, vehicles, and oil products. The green globalist policies don't work and cost us all. Look back at the last 9 years. Green means poverty. Cheap oil products and gas means prosperity. Simple, eh? God bless you, Danielle, and your team. Keep on fighting for all Canadians and build the pipelines we want." So yeah, in case you've forgotten, the last episode of the Alberta Roundup was an interview with Alberta's Energy Minister Brian Jean. And speaking to what Basket Hound said, the tides on energy seem to be shifting from anti to pro, as Canadians are realizing that cheap energy is the fastest and easiest way to economic prosperity, and the best way for Canada to be successful on the world stage, not only economically, but in reducing emissions, in fact, worldwide, by supplying our clean energy instead of coal from dictators. Because the world needs energy, and it really is one or the other. The next comment comes from @Roma Eterna, who said, quote, "Absolutely thrilled to have uprooted my family to Alberta. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Danielle. The Constitution will save Alberta and Canada. Follow the Constitution to the letter of the law. If the province has jurisdiction over anything, take it from the feds. Period." Yeah, I've decided to highlight this comment because this is a common theme I've seen not only on these videos, but on posts across the World Wide Web, which is that freedom-seeking Canadians have relocated to Alberta. But I think this has to be viewed as good and bad in a way, because Alberta is, of course, dealing with population and immigration issues like the rest of the country, albeit primarily from international immigration. And also, some people may be immigrating to Alberta for its economic benefit, despite not agreeing with the morals and economic policies that have let the province become what it is today. But speaking towards provincial jurisdiction, Alberta's current government has done this more than any other province, which is challenge the feds at every instance where they feel that their jurisdiction is being imposed upon. So the next comment comes from @reboot_2.0, who said, quote, Brian Jean's answers satisfied my opinions on how the Alberta government is treating the oil and gas industry and reminds me of how the NDP single term did so much damage to the province. Yeah, this kind of ties in with my last comment there, because new Albertans may not be aware of the damage caused by the NDP during its governance if they did not live here during that time. Remember, Rachel Notley's victory in 2015 ended 44 years of rule in Alberta by the Progressive Conservatives. She subsequently lost the elections in 2019 and 2023 before resigning as NDP leader. So I'm curious to ask you guys, do you think that the Conservatives will hold the throne in Alberta again for 4 decades or even longer? Or will the NDP or some other party be able to take over at some point in the future, and why? That wraps up our comment roundup in this week's show. My name's Isaac Lamoureux, your host of the Alberta Roundup. Have a great weekend. Thank you and God bless. May Alberta prosper, strong and free.